Hello, this is Joe Polish, president of Piranha Marketing and founder of the Genius Network interview series, and you're about to hear one of my Genius Network interviews, and I just want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this, and I hope you find it very useful. If you want to find out more information about some of the interviews and resources that can help you in your business, you can go to www.joepolish.com. And we have a Joe Polish Recommends section with all kinds of resources and vendors and services and products that we recommend that can help you in your business. And also for more useful interviews and a whole list of other people that I've interviewed, you can go to www.geniusnetwork.com. Thanks and enjoy the interview.
Hello, this is Joe Polish, and today I've got a very special interview and conversation I'm going to have with a guy by the name of John Warrilow, who is the author of a really phenomenal book that I just read called Built to Sell, Creating a Business That Can Thrive Without You. And this is not only going to be a recording that is for Genius Network, it's also going to be a special episode that I'm going to put on ilovemarketing.com for all the people out there that love marketing but also want to sell their business. So, who is John? Let me give you a quick piece of his bio from a really cool ebook you can download called The Freedom Manifesto, a battle cry for business owners at his website at builttosell.com. Okay, and so here's what he says about himself. I started 4 companies, the most recent of which was a research business I tried to sell in 2004, only to be told by a mergers and acquisition professional that it was too dependent on me personally. Learning that my business was unsellable was frustrating. First I denied it, then I got angry. Finally I set about remodeling the business into one that could thrive without me. After lots of trial and error, it started to take off, and we were acquired in 2008 by a publicly traded company. I learned a lot in those 4 years, and those lessons became the inspiration to write the book Built to Sell and start the blog of the same name. I think the world needs more entrepreneurs. If I had to rely on anyone to get me off the side of a mountain, I want a creative, tenacious, and tough-minded entrepreneur beside me. When I vote, I prefer candidates who have run a business. I believe entrepreneurs will be the ones to solve our biggest problems and bring the developing world the quality of life that Westerners enjoy, which is why I created a team of built-to-sell readers who lend money to entrepreneurs in the developing world through an organization called Kiva. Most of the year I live with my wife and kids in a town called Aix province in southern France, which is where John is right now when we're going to do this interview, where the climate enables year-round cycling and running, which is important to me because one day I'd like to qualify for the Ironman World Championship in Kona, Hawaii. Until then, I will have to settle with being a middle-of-the-pack age grouper in the few races I do each year. Enough about me. Are you ready to build a company that you could sell? So anyway, the reason I wanted to read that is I think it's a cool bio, and secondly, John, you're in France right now, so it's kind of funny. So how are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good. Enough about me talking about you. Let's talk about you and Built to Sell, and all of our listeners out there are entrepreneurs, and a lot of them, maybe have thought about selling. I think a lot of people, after having read your book, probably it doesn't even really cross their mind in quite the context that, you would explain it. So I'll first start off with, one of the most weirdest questions that I could ask you, but it's very basic, but I think in a lot of ways I'd love to hear your perspective. What is a business? I mean, when someone builds a business, like your subtitle, creating a business that can thrive without you, what is the John Warrilow definition of a business?
To me, I draw a distinction between a job and a business, and a business is a company that can thrive without its owner. And most businesses are actually just jobs. They may be well-paid jobs, but in my opinion, they're really just jobs because the moment the owner of the business goes home at night or takes a week vacation, the business stops. The revenue stops generating, the product stops going out the door. And that, to me, while the U.S. Census Bureau would say, well, that's a business because it's got the right IRS code or whatever, to me it's not really a business if it doesn't exist. Because when you think about it, for a business to be like an incorporated company as an entity onto itself legally, but for me, until it can actually subsist without the owner being there every day, it's not really a business. It's just perhaps a well-paid job for that owner.
Yeah.
Again, I draw that distinction.
Well, yeah, and I think that's where, how many percentages of quote-unquote businesses that are out there do you think really are jobs disguised in the minds of the business owner as a business?
I mean, if you look at if you look at the U.S. market, there's 27 million businesses in the United States, according to the SBA, Small Business Administration. Of those, roughly 6 million of them have employees. So right there, you're carving off 20 million. I don't know. I'm doing the math quickly, but maybe 75% of all businesses do not have a single employee. And so again, now that's not to say there aren't examples of web companies that are highly leveraged and that aren't successful unto themselves. But for the most part, that would be an acid test to say, okay, of the 6 million that have employees, that's at least a sense of a business that's making an effort to try to create something that can thrive without the owner. And for me, there's a couple of pieces of that. One, it's to have a business that's valuable if it can thrive without the owner. But there's actually I think a bigger reason to want to create a business that can thrive without the owner, and that really is that you can punch through the ceiling, and oftentimes an imaginary or in fact invisible ceiling that holds back a lot of business owners because they get stuck because there are only 24 hours in the day. You can't kind of replicate yourself over and over again, and as a result, a lot of businesses kind of hit this plateau. For me, that happened in my research company. We hit $3.3 million in sales, and I just could not get beyond that, and we plateaued for 3 consecutive years. I'm sure it happens for carpet cleaners at a different time, or for lawyers, or for architects. But I think every business that's dependent on the owner, it reaches that plateau, and that's, I think, for me, the biggest reason to make sure your business can thrive without you, the owner, is so you can grow it, so you can grow it beyond that ceiling.
Now you wrote this book, Built to Sell, which I really think is a phenomenal book. I really got a tremendous amount of value out of it. It gave me a lot of new perspective and ways of looking at my own business, at the businesses of my clients, and in a lot of ways, I read the E-Myth a long time ago. I mean, the first version back in 1992, I believe. And, later, 1997, Michael Gerber, had me come down to the E-Myth Academy and do a day of consulting with him on the marketing of the E-Myth Academy. And, I thought the E-Myth was just a fantastic book. And in a lot of ways, I think Built to Sell is like a modern version of the E-Myth, with a much different sort of perspective and way to really look about why do you have a business, what do you do with it, how do you set it up so it's systemized and automated, and ultimately, how do you get the most financial reward from your business and the most freedom, because in a lot of ways your book really represents freedom, and what it really shows it's a short book too. I mean, so this conversation we're having, I would almost say, is a companion to people reading the book. If you've not read it, pick it up. I mean, you're going to hear me say that a couple times throughout this recording because I really cannot imagine this would not be a good use of time for everyone that is listening. And you kind of tell, so what is the purpose of the book? I mean, why did you write the book?
Yeah, it really was. As I said in your intro piece, it was going through that process of being told that my business wasn't sellable was a frustrating experience. And I've studied business owners for years. My last research company helped big companies understand the small business market. So we interviewed 10,000 small business owners every year for 10 years. Before that, I produced a radio show. So I've kind of seen and thought about entrepreneurs from a lot of different angles. One of the perspectives I saw was that 50% of business owners now want to exit their company in the next 10 years, yet just 1% successfully do so every year. There's just this massive gap between the percentage of people that would love to sell their business and the percentage that actually successfully do. And again, from what I've seen, it largely comes down to this idea that the business is not capable of running without the owner. And so I think the first step for a lot of folks who are listening to this to kind of think through and look at their business through this lens is to say, like Michael Gerber does in the E-Myth, is can you systematize your business to a point where you could teach employees how to do what you do? And a lot of times that comes down to a lot of business owners recoil at that idea, and they say, "Well, no, I'm the expert. Like, there's no one could do what I do." And I, in a lot of accounts, I agree with them, but again, that's not really a sellable business. So I talk about this notion of the prevention paradigm, which is if you're a subject matter expert, let's say you're the world's greatest, a swimming pool technician, and if you have a fancy home, you have a swimming pool in your home, you call this company to get it fixed when it breaks. If you're the world's greatest swimming pool technician, and nobody else can do it like you, well, then, you're never going to be able to sell your company. But if you take the prevention paradigm and saying, what is it that I could sell that would prevent people from having to call my company, that's what you can probably systematize. Because the reason you have to hire a pool guy is typically because the pump's broken because you got something clogged in the filters. Well, you could pay a guy $8 an hour to get the leaves out of the filter system so that it doesn't break in the first place. But once it breaks, then that's when you have to call in the owner. Same thing for virus protection in an IT environment. For an IT guy, once the virus has taken hold in a company, it's the owner of the IT company that has to put in the midnight hour to fix the problem. But you can hire a high school kid to download the latest app, the patches for virus protection software. So it's this idea of the prevention paradigm. I think if your business is dependent on you personally, and you're the subject matter expert, think about what it is you could sell or offer that would prevent someone from having to call you. As counterintuitive as that may sound, it's often where you really find the secret to kind of building your business up.
Yeah, exactly. And of course you explain that very well in the book and the story that you actually describe it with. Well, I'm going to ask you some strategic and some tactical questions for our listeners. How do you package a business to sell? I mean, how do you kind of start that?
Yeah, well, there's a basic process that you can go through that is fairly well known in the industry among mergers and acquisitions professionals, and these are the guys like you have a real estate agent to sell your home, an M&A person is the guy or the gal who sells your company. And the first thing they're going to do is they're going to create a 1 or 2 page disguised teaser, which is a document that they will use, and they will send it to people they think might want to buy your business. But your company name will be disguised. They won't know who you are, but it'll include some of the sexy statistics about your growth rate, your clientele, etc. Some people will see that teaser and hopefully say, yeah, I want to know more about that. And in return for actually revealing who your company name is, they have to sign a non-disclosure agreement, at which point they then get what's called the book, which is it's either a binder or an online data room where the potential buyer finds out who you are and your kind of approach to the business. And that's really where you get into the details of packaging your business. You want to talk about, your basic financial statistics, growth rate, revenue, profitability, but also kind of what industry you're in, what are the dynamics, what future growth you see, and so forth. You want to kind of paint a picture of how big your business could become, because that's why acquirers buy businesses generally, is to either grow their own business or grow a product line that they think needs to be bolstered. Skype was acquired recently by Microsoft. That's a huge strategic position for Microsoft to take. Not because they're not buying Skype's profitability, because Skype's had no profitability. They're buying what Skype will do to them from a strategic perspective, getting people to upgrade to the latest versions of Microsoft products. So,
yeah, and I very much by the same way that Google, purchased YouTube and all that.
That's right. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So now, there's this line that probably, Michael Gerber helped, popularize. I don't know if he originally came up with it, but it's thrown around a lot, which is, work on your business, not in your business. And, and I would kind of even add to it, working, smart versus working hard, or working hard on smart things. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways to look at it. But what is the difference, really? What is, from your perspective, and you know a heck of a lot about this, and you spent so many. You're an expert in this area. What is the real difference between working on your business and in your business? Because I hear lots of entrepreneurs throw that around a lot, but as you've even said with the statistics, most of them don't really do that. So what does that mean to you?
I'm reminded of a couple of folks that I had. I actually moderated a focus group years ago now of business owners, and I said, describe to me a day in the life of your business in a visual kind of way. And one guy said, I picture a wheel, and I'm in the hub, and all of the spokes go in and out between my employees. And so when there's a problem, my employees come into the hub, and I dispatch a response. When there's a customer who needs something, they come into the hub, and I dispatch, a sales message to them, etc. But all of the communications, everything comes into the hub and goes out of the hub, into the hub and out of the hub. Kind of like United Airlines has O'Hare Airport in Chicago. Like everything goes through the hub. Another business owner said, I imagine myself sitting on the second floor of my home, and I'm watching them pick the apple trees that have just come to harvest. I'm watching all the workers pick the apples off the trees. I'm watching the truck arrive. I'm watching them put them on the conveyor belt that's attached to the truck. They go into the back of the truck, and the truck leaves down the road. And to me, that's the essence of a difference between an entrepreneur who's working in the business, the guy who thinks of himself as the hub and the hub and spoke model, who for everyone he has an answer and everything comes to him, and someone who's working on the business. They got the notion that you're sitting on the second floor of your house and you're looking down and things are happening without you choreographing them. Another analogy you might want to think about is the idea of, you take a sports team, whether, a hockey team or a football team, the coach never steps onto the field. As much as the coach wants to play the game and teach the kids or the people how to do it better, they never step onto the field. And that's the difference for me between working on and in the business. If you're, and Michael Gerber said it and said it better than ever I could ever do, but it's the idea that, you want to stay off the field, coach, train, provide systems, but never step into the playing field, because that's when you turn your business from a company into a job.
Yeah, interesting. I was in Necker Island for a week in, this last February, in Richard Branson's house in his kitchen, talking with him, and I asked him, I said, Richard, have you ever had a situation in your life where you used to go into the office? And he said, well, when I had my first business, when he started, the student, when he was really young, he said, I used to go into the office, but he goes, one of the beauties of having multiple businesses like I have is that I, always work from home, because if there's more than one office, where am I going to go? And it forces me to stay out of the office and have, people run my companies instead of me running them. And I said, well, what about food and stuff? Do you ever go to you ever been to a grocery store? And he honest to God, he looked up, he goes, Joe, he goes, you got to delegate. He goes, I go, well, you ever gone shopping in a grocery store, picked up eggs or something? He's like, I don't think so. I'm like, you've never been in a grocery store? He's like, no, people do that for me. And I'm like, really? Not in your entire life? You've never walked in a grocery store? He honestly, I don't know. I mean, I can't even fathom that you would never go into a grocery store. But, he's like, I can't really remember ever going to a grocery store, because, but, I like working from home, and, people run my companies. And I just thought, if that doesn't kind of give you a perspective of how a billionaire sort of looks at things, that one sort of did it for me.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah, it's just funny as hell to me. So you talk about scalability in Built to Sell, and that's another word that gets thrown around a lot. So I'd like to ask you a couple things. What is a scalable business, and also can you define what scalable means?
Yeah, for sure. My definition for scalable is that the business can grow 10x and you can maintain or improve your profit margin. So a lot of companies can grow, but they grow at the cost of their profit margin. And I think a scalable company actually can grow many times its size, but again, maintain or improve the overall profit margin that it has. And I think there's a bunch of different ways to think about scale. So there's geographic scalability. Crumb's Bake Shop, as an example, has gone from serving $4 cupcakes on the Upper West Side of Manhattan to having 30 locations and actually baking 1 million cupcakes a month, I think the statistic is that I last saw, because they've scaled this model that worked in New York and they've gone to other kind of well-to-do neighborhoods. That's what I would call geographic scalability. There's vertical scalability when you've got, if you've got a hotel and it has 200 rooms in it and you're at 75, you're only at 75 rooms, you've got a lot of room to scale up in terms of vertical scalability of that hotel without any major infrastructure costs. So that's what I would call vertical scalability. Horizontal scalability, as we talked about Richard Branson, I've never met Sir Richard, but he's done a great job of what I would call horizontal scalability, which is really taking a rabid fan base of customers. The Virgin brand stands for an alternative to the fat and the lazy people that are taking advantage of customers in the marketplace. British Airways, as an example, the mobile phone carriers have an oligopoly in the UK. He has said, no, we're going to give you an alternative, and he's scaled that idea and the passion that those customers have for that idea across different business lines. So unlike geographic scalability, where you're crossing physical lines, his is crossing kind of industry lines with one key idea. And then the fourth type of scalability that I've seen is cultural scalability, where an idea that is very successful in one cultural context. I live in France, so over here, French bread is like next to the church is like the most important thing in France. And so there's a company called Paul that is a bakery. It's as ubiquitous as Starbucks is in North America. Well, it turns out that people in other cultures also love French fresh bread. So Paul has scaled culturally and is now, in markets like Japan and Dubai. They're in China. I think they've got a store in North America now. So that's what I would call cultural scalability.
Awesome. Well, that definitely helps explain it, so thank you. Now, why do you think most business owners never set their business up to scale? Is it because they don't understand it, that it's too daunting, they've never been given the right direction? I mean, like you said, 50% or whatever of business owners, want to sell their business, and 1% actually, do it the next 10 years. What is going on?
Well, I think it happens naturally. It's a slippery slope. So you put your shingle out and you say, I'm going to run a business, and you think of an auto mechanic, for example. He starts his auto mechanic shop, and he's a great mechanic. He's been he went to school for it, he apprenticed for it, and he's got his shop now. You go to that mechanic because you trust him or her. He's the person that you want to fix your car. The problem is, 9 women can't have a baby in 1 month. It just takes time to learn how to be a great mechanic, and so that business is never going to be scalable. You're always going to want to talk to your mechanic to fix your car. He knows it intimately. He knows the history of the car, etc. If you take that business unto itself, it's a very difficult business to scale, but there may be something in the business that meets the trifecta of scale, which is it is teachable to employees, it is valuable to customers, and it is repeatable. In other words, it has a recurring revenue nature. And a guy named Jim Hinman actually came along and looked at the average kind of auto mechanic shop and said, nothing about this business makes sense to me. It's not scalable. But he figured there was one tiny little piece of it that had the kernel of an idea around scalability. And he said, oil changes is what scales, because I can teach a 16-year-old how to change oil. People have to come in every 5,000 miles to get their oil changed, so it's recurring. And customers value it because at the time, your only alternative was to send your car into the dealership for half a day. And with his company, Jiffy Lube, you could get in and out in 20 minutes. Well, the rest of the story is obviously he scales up Jiffy Lube to be one of the fastest growing automotive service sector companies in the United States, sells it to Pennzoil Motor Oil Company for something like $50 million. But I think the moral of the story is that I think every business has a kernel, something in it that meets the trifecta of scale. Again, it's teachable, valuable, and repeatable. And I think the job of us entrepreneurs is to be brutal with each other and say, what is it that, because it may be in the case of the average service station, oil changes represented 2, 3, 4% of the average, service station revenue. It was tiny. But that's what he discovered was the basis on which he could scale a business in that sector.
Yeah, awesome. So, well, you talk in the book, Built to Sell, about the difference between products and services, and I'd like you to talk about that the difference between products and services as it relates to selling a business.
Yeah, sure. So when an acquirer comes in and looks at your company, I think they've got two different boxes. They have a box and a method that they use to buy service companies, and they have a box that they might put you in that they use to buy product companies. And you want to do whatever you can to get out of the service box and be put into the product box, because the service box is a model where they say, yeah, we'd love to buy your company, Joe, but here's the formula we're going to buy it. You're going to become an employee of our company, and over the next 5 years, we're going to do some things together. And if they all work out swimmingly, then we're going to pay you some money for the shares that we bought of your company. But if they don't, you're out of luck. It's called an earn-out. And most service businesses are sold on an earn-out. There's only a little bit of money that gets exchanged at closing day, and the rest is what they call on the come. The problem with that, of course, it sounds great, and biz dev guys are great at selling that proposition to entrepreneurs, but the problem is you become an employee, and as an employee in a small kind of cog in a major organization, you have none of the control and the freedom you had as an entrepreneur to get results. And so no matter how results-oriented you are, if you're now just a very small piece of a large organization, it's very hard to get things done. And so you want to avoid the service box at all costs and really minimize the emphasis of an earn-out and get put in the product box. In the product box, companies are bought based on the fact that it's not the people that they're buying, it's the methodology, it's the products, it's the customers, it's the actual ongoing business that can thrive, again, without the owner. And so a couple of the tricks, if you're in the service industry, a couple of things you can do to look more like a product business is to create reoccurring revenue. That's probably the single most important thing any service business can do, is to create a reoccurring subscription, membership type model. I'll give you one example, one that I love because it's from an industry where you wouldn't really expect it, and that is it comes from the construction business. So a guy named Jim Vaganis was a guy who did a lot of work on homes, and people who work with their hands, tradesmen and women, plumbers, electricians, whatever, they run these major ebbs and flows in their business. 16-hour days one day, unemployment the next day, 16-hour day. Very hard to kind of create some sort of level of recurring revenue. And so Jim says, there's got to be a better way. And so he approaches well-to-do homeowners in the Washington, D.C. area and says, look, I want to manage your home for you. I will preemptively, on an annual contract, fix your house before it breaks. I'm going to come in the fall and change your furnace filter. I'm going to get the leaves out of the swimming pool. I'm going to get the leaves out of the eaves troughs. I'm going to change all the things that need to get done in your house on a preemptive basis. And I'm going to do that for one fixed annual fee per year. Well, customers love this service. It's called hassle-free homes. They love this service. Two-income family, don't have the time, etc. Every year they renew. And you've got this reoccurring revenue stream in an industry that typically lives hand to mouth.
Right.
And so I think that's the most important thing that any service company can do, is to create some degree of reoccurring revenue, to make the business, make it obvious to an acquirer that the business will continue, whether that owner decides to stay on or not.
Yeah, in my company, Piranha Marketing, where we sell, training programs to, service businesses, the largest niche, and even to this day, we're still the largest provider of, how-to direct response advice and templates and everything to the cleaning industry, is, putting them on maintenance programs where they sell maintenance programs to their clients, either paid monthly or quarterly or annually, preferably the more frequent, the better, because it is the ongoing reoccurring revenue. It helps with cash flow during slow seasons, and we have programs called the No-Brainer program. And when they present that, and they get 100, 200, 300, 400 people, that creates a process that for the first time ever, they now have the ability to actually sell that in a much more appealing way to a potential buyer, whereas if nothing like that exists, very, very hard to sell a carpet cleaning business that's set up as a job.
Yeah. I think that's just tremendous advice that you're giving the folks who you speak with. And I think it's not only making their business more valuable from the standpoint of the reoccurring revenue and being able to see that tail of revenue into the future. I think what it also does is gives the owner a tremendous peace of mind because they're not worried about cash flow. But remember something called the teeter-totter model. And the teeter-totter model is, you remember being on a teeter-totter as a kid. The heavy person would go up, and the lighter person, or the heavy person would go down, the lighter person would go up, etc. There is a teeter-totter formula that acquiring companies apply to the companies they're looking at buying. And the teeter-totter formula is this: when an acquirer has to go in and buy a company, they have to write 2 checks. They have to write one to the owner, but they also have to write a second check. And that is to fund the company's working capital. That's the amount of money that the company needs in the bank the day you hand over the keys. So that's the amount of money you need when someone else takes ownership of the company to pay payroll, to pay your immediate kind of expenses, et cetera. And if your business is generating cash, then they have to pay little or nothing for working capital. And the teeter-totter goes down, and the amount of money that they're willing to pay you, the owner, goes up. Likewise, if when they have to take over your company, they have to inject a lot of money into working capital just to pay your immediate expenses, the amount of money the teeter-totter goes down, and the amount of money they're willing to spend to buy your company goes down as well. So there's a direct relationship between the degree to which you have a positive cash flow cycle and the amount of money you're going to sell your company for down the road. So I think peace of mind, recurring revenue, but also just the value of your company is going to go up if you're billing, particularly upfront on these kind of maintenance contracts. You're going to find that there are just many reasons to do that.
Yeah, awesome. Great analogy. You talk about Southwest Airlines in the book Built to Sell, and I think that's great. I love Southwest Airlines. I think they're a very well-run company. I'm even working this week. It's kind of funny trying to see if I can get Herb Kelleher, the original founder of Southwest, to come speak at one of my 25K groups. And you talk about the one plane analogy, and I'd like to get your perspective on why does Southwest Airlines work so well compared to other airlines?
Well, yeah, they use the 737, right? And so their maintenance crew know how to turn that plane around, and when something goes wrong, they have a diagnostician that comes in and knows exactly what the likelihood has gone wrong, like what is likely needs to be replaced. Each additional plane type adds, it doesn't just add, but it multiplies the complexity of keeping those planes in the air. And the beauty of the Southwest Airline example is obviously that they rely on turning those planes around. It keeps their costs low, and their whole model is based on getting people in and out quickly. They don't have reserved seating, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they do one thing and one thing only, and they're able to then scale up the business. And I think that's a critical message. And again, it comes back to the example of Jiffy Lube. You're not going to get your transmission overhauled at Jiffy Lube. They do oil changes. I'm aware of a company in Danbury, England. All they do is school photographs. So you can't go to them if you want a T-ball shot or your wife's belly, shot when she's pregnant or the kids on their birthday. They will not do those photographs for you. But if you need the school photograph company done, the school photograph done, if you're a principal or a headmaster and you need that picture that you send home to all the parents, you call this company. And they have a formula within 8 minutes. They get kids into the auditorium, standing at the right spot. They get them to smile using a bunch of techniques, stuffed animals for the little kids, etc., and back in the classroom in 8 minutes. It's because all they do, like Southwest Airlines, all they do is one thing, and that enables them to build, a model. I think as entrepreneurs as well, Joe. I think there's I don't mean to sound dogmatic or in any way negative about entrepreneurs, because again, as I said in the beginning, I think the world needs more entrepreneurs. But I think we can be a little egotistical. And that buzz you get when you fix a customer's problem and in the shower of thank yous that they give you becomes addictive. And it makes us fall back into this formula of sort of reinventing our business based on whatever customer problem comes to them. And while that may feel good in the beginning and instantly when you actually get those rewards from the customer and those thank yous, I think it comes at the price of actually building a scalable company. And so as tempting as it is to dance around and solve all your customers' problems, I think it's much more scalable to pick one thing, one airline type. All we do is school photographs. All we do is change oil. And you're going to have to turn some customers away, and that might impact the sense of your making a contribution in the short term. But I think you're going to build a much larger, more impactful business if you do that and stick to your knitting.
Yeah, and I mean, and again, we won't have enough time to go into all that in depth, which is one of the reasons why I said in the very beginning this conversation is really a companion to the book, and giving people some suggestions and advice on looking at this. But really, if you want to our listeners, if you want a really well-rounded understanding of this, along with kind of what to do and how to do it, the great thing in the book is you actually break it down into a whole process into tips and suggestions on what to do, and you summarize all of the tips at the very end of the book on basically what someone needs to do in order to set their business up to sell, and why selling less of certain things is and less offers is really the key to setting up your business for sale, and that's why I love the Southwest, one plane analogy. Let me ask you, how long is the setup process to prepare and sell the business? Meaning, we're talking about this. You wrote a book about it. How hard is it to set the business up? What are the things that a business owner is going to need to do, from the hours put into it, money, opportunity costs, saying no? I mean, what do people really have to? I mean, what's not the nice, you can sell your business, here's the dream, but I mean, really, what are people looking at that they're going to have to do in order to set their business up to sell it?
Yeah, so I would divide that question into two parts. What do you have to do to prepare your business to be a sellable company? And then how much time does it take to sell your company once it's sellable? For the first question, I think really what you want to do is carve out 3 years. And I know that sounds awful, but if you think about it in the context of the alternative being a 5-year earnout where you don't get anything for your business and you've got to wait 5 years and then you might get something if you meet these, meet some targets in the future, it's actually saving 2 years if you think about it that way. But I think 3 years is what you need to think through. The first year is when you make all of the very difficult changes about changing your model, reducing the number of things you sell, putting your positive cash flow cycle in place so you're charging up front, putting your reoccurring revenue stream in place so that you've got that reoccurring revenue. That's where all the heavy lifting starts. And it starts, by the way, by defining what it is you're going to sell, teachable, valuable, repeatable. It's got to be scalable. And then putting that, charging up front by putting the reoccurring revenue or subscription model in place, because that way you've got the cash and the peace of mind to make these sort of gut-wrenching changes, which I think in a lot of cases they are. So the first year is the ugliest, most painful, lots of sleepless nights, year. The second and third year, you're really just, the car is built, you're just driving it, and you're proving that it works. You're tweaking the model, and you're getting your financials in a place where you can show that not only did you do this and it's now sellable, but you did it and you ran it for a couple of years and you proved the business case. You proved the model. So I think years 2 and 3 are a lot more fun. I mean, think about it. You've got positive cash flow being thrown off. Your cash flow concerns have kind of gone away or diminished enormously. And by the way, your customer complaints go way down too, because now you've got salespeople in place who are doing the selling, because you're selling one thing which allows other people to do the selling as opposed to you, the owner, having to do everything because you're selling too many things, relying on your subject matter expertise. You've got just a much better quality of life in years 2 and 3. And a lot of people get to the end of year 3 and say, you know what, this is fun. I don't want to sell my business. And I love that. I love hearing that. I think that's awesome. I think you've got a business that you could sell, but doesn't mean you have to sell it. It means that you could, you could sleep well at night knowing you're sitting on a valuable asset, but you don't have to sell it. And so I think years 2 and 3 are a lot more fun, and then at the end of 3 years, you've got all the choice in the world: sell it, put a manager in place, or just continue to run it because it's not burning you out.
Yeah, and one thing I will say, and you do walk through a guy in the book named Alex, where you kind of tell the whole story of starting from where he was at to setting the business up and going through the whole process to where he eventually is in the position to sell his company if he wants to sell his company. And I think a lot of people live in a fantasy land that something's going to just show up one day and they're going to be able to cash out. And if hope is not a strategy. It just isn't. I think there's a book of that title somewhere. But basically, even if someone has no intention that's listening of selling their business, I think if they actually read your book and started thinking about their company and building it so that they could sell it, they would have a lot more money, a lot more freedom, less complexity, better clients. If you're going to put in the time anyway, you might as well put in the time to set it up this way, and that's why I think this is such a critical message for entrepreneurs. One thing I want to touch on, because I know you only got a few minutes left, some business owners sabotage their efforts to set up the business to sell by feeling guilty about actually selling it, like they're abandoning their employees or something that have worked there to build it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't get that, frankly. I just, I don't fall into the category of business as this romantic sort of notion of having a higher purpose and the importance of having these very lofty. 99.9% of people go to work for a paycheck so they can put money on the table. I think it's okay to have a vision for what you want to do, and that vision to be inspiring to your employees. But let's not mix up commerce with spirituality. I think those two things are different. I get a little kind of crazy when I hear that talk. I think when you talk about your employees, they have very basic needs. They want to know that they have a job, and they want to know that they have a potential in their business, in your business, to go forward, and that there are exciting opportunities to coming, and they're going to interesting things that they can work on. Well, if you get acquired as a company, they see the top of the rung every time you walk around the office. And if you're a $3, $4, $10 million business, that's not a very high rung, And so if you get acquired by a company 10, 20, 35, 50 times the size of you, suddenly there's this enormous amount of career mobility that employee gets. So number one, they get career mobility. They get more resources. There are a lot of things that come with being part of a bigger company. Sure, there are downsides to the transition, and sure, there are people that lose their jobs. But for the most part, your most upwardly mobile employees land just fine on their feet when they go to work in a big company or another company. I think entrepreneurs, most of us, are not wired to maintain and run a business for 30 years. I just don't think that's part of who we are as people, and I think we do our companies a disservice by sitting there for too long. I mean, I think we all get that excitement and that buzz for starting a business, that the first few years where everything's new and different and you're building. Once you kind of build it, and it's just sort of same old, I think you do your company a disservice from sitting there and riding it out for 25 years. I think you're sapping it of energy, sapping it of creativity, because you're off doing other things and scratching that itch in other places. I don't think, why not let somebody else who's young, ready to go, excited about your business, why don't you let them have another run? I've got this idea that I wrote about recently, a blog post called Life in 10-Year Chunks. And for me, that's the right kind of duration. I think as entrepreneurs, we are very fortunate. We're not like going for work at Procter & Gamble or Coca-Cola, where you have to stay on the career, gerbil wheel or whatever it's called, hamster wheel. If you step off, you lose your career mobility. As entrepreneurs, we don't have that. We can take chunks of time to start a business and leave, and then take a couple of years off. I'm in one of these buffer periods right now where I don't have an operating company. I sold my last business. I live over here in France, and I love that lifestyle because I feel like it's re-energizing me for the next business. If I was sitting there kind of plugging away in my same old company, I wouldn't feel the same degree of energy and creativity that I do. So I just think 10 years is a good run rate. It's a chance to get the business off the ground, work out the bugs, and by the time 8, 9, 10 years comes around, I'm bored. I want to move on to something else. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs probably feel the same way. So, you kind of hit one of my hot buttons there. Sorry, Joe, for going.
No. Hey, I totally agree with what you're saying. There's great advice there, and at the end of the day, I mean, I really believe most people got into this game of entrepreneurship, being a business owner, call it whatever you want to call it, for freedom. And, your book, Built to Sell, is fantastic. People need to go out and get a copy of it. You can get it, on Amazon, any bookstore. You can go to builttosell.com. I've not read the Freedom Manifesto yet, which I'm going to be doing this week, and that's a free ebook that is on your site. So I just love the name, though, the Freedom Manifesto. And what I want to wrap up with here is that, everyone that is listening, even if you don't even have an inkling of selling your business, which I can't imagine why you'd be listening to this, conversation if you don't. I think if you read the book, it's going to change the way you think, and that is important. It'll teach you how to make yourself unique if you're in a commodity business. It will really, teach you a lot about what an unsellable business looks like and why that's relying on its owner, and you'll learn how to know if you got a mediocre team or not. Why you're going to learn more about why you should sell your business, what role marketing plays in your business, the different types of ways to sell a business, how to reward employees when you sell your business. That and many more things are in the book Built to Sell. And for people listening, if they just want to go get a bunch of just great stuff, your site really does have a lot there, including the Freedom Manifesto. And what's that all about? Why should someone go and download that?
Yeah, that's just really a 60 or 70. Actually, I think it's 82 pages of really it's a manifesto, a call to action for business owners to create businesses that could thrive without them. It's really intentionally kind of saying, stop building these businesses that are dependent on you personally, and build businesses that can thrive without you, because that's where you get the majority of your options. And so it's really it's a call to arms, as it were.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, John, because I know you need to, out in France, I have no earthly idea what time it even is there right now, but I know that right about this time you have to hop off the line. So any famous last words for our Genius Network and I Love Marketing listeners, or any other entrepreneurs that are listening to this right now? Any final words of wisdom before we send them off into the world of packaging and setting up their company in order to one day sell it and get hopefully greatly rewarded?
Yeah, there's I'm not sure if they're words of wisdom, but there is one little thing you might want to think about doing, which is it's called the Scalability Index Quiz, and it's think of it like a pregnancy test for whether or not your business is sellable as it's structured right now. It takes 5 minutes to do. You don't have to pee on a stick. And at the end of it, you kind of know whether or not your business is sellable. So you can go to builttosell.com, and I think there's a tab called Tools in the book, and it's free. And at least once you take that, you'll know kind of A, if you have a business, B, what you might get for it if you do go to sell it, and see what changes you can make to make it more sellable. So I'm not sure it's words of wisdom, but hopefully it's a tool people find valuable.
Awesome. Hey, man, well, thank you so much for taking the time. John Warrilow, spelled not like it sounds, but Warrilow. The website is builttosell.com. Read his book, and if you are a geniusnetwork.com or an I Love Marketing subscriber, go to ilovemarketing.com, and please leave your comments about what you got out of this interview. And to all of our listeners, love to hear how it is helping you set up your company. And again, John, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Hello, this is Joe Polish. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this interview. I hope you found it very useful. Please give me your feedback on all of the interviews that you listen to. I'd love to hear your feedback so we can always deliver a great program for you. Our website is www.joepolish.com, and we also have a Joe Polish Recommends section, so you can take a lot of the ideas and concepts that you hear on my Genius Network interview series and apply them to your business and find vendors and resources. You can go to joepolish.com to find that information and click on the Joe Polish Recommends section. And also, if you would like to find out about more interviews and invest in more useful Genius Network series interviews, go to www.geniusnetwork.com. Thanks, and eat your competition alive.